After rebirth, I threw myself at Jiangli, the herbalist. The next day, I went to the general's mansion myself to call off our betrothal. In my previous life, we lived in perfect harmony. He fought battles abroad while I managed the household in the capital, serving my in-laws and raising our children until our family grew large. In the 12th month of my 72nd year, I caught a chill and fell gravely ill. After death, I became a wisp of a ghost, drifting north to bid him farewell. Only upon arriving did I learn he had lived in two homes. One was his ancestral home in the capital, the other a humble dwelling in the northern frontier. After my death, my spirit lingered above the general's residence. Seeing Lord White Impermanence come to claim me, I plucked up the courage to beg him, let me drift to the frontier to see my husband one last time before following him to the underworld for reincarnation. Perhaps my age made me rather chatty. Unable to bear my nagging, the lord of the underworld finally agreed, but ordered me to return swiftly. I transformed into a gust of wind and hurried northward. 3 years had passed since I last saw my old man, and I truly missed him. But upon reaching Wu City in the northern frontier, I saw the old man I'd longed for, carefully supporting a kind-faced elderly woman. They walked through the snowstorm, chatting and laughing. I watched them, hand in hand, stroll leisurely into the general's mansion of the northern frontier. The servants inside respectfully cleared the snow for them. "General! Madam! Mind the slippery snow!" The old woman gazed tenderly at Jiangli. "Husband, you should return to the capital. Your sister must miss you." The old man frowned slightly at her words. He lifted his face, gazing thoughtfully toward the direction of the capital for a moment before slowly shaking his head. "No." He took her withered, thin hand in his own, tucking it into the sleeve of his robe and rubbing it warmly. "We're both this age now, and your health isn't good. I must stay by your side longer, lest I miss seeing you for the last time." Hearing this, the old woman lowered her face and smiled coyly, her wrinkles resembling chrysanthemums, making her look much older than me. At supper, the two of them leaned together eating mutton hot pot, feeding each other, utterly sentimental. I hovered nearby, silently observing this loving couple, letting my own fervent emotions gradually freeze over beneath the northern frontier's snow and ice. I had always believed such intimacy belonged solely to him and me. But it wasn't so. It turned out. What I thought was deep marital devotion, a lifelong bond between just the two of us, was nothing but a one-sided joke. Perhaps, among the nobles who openly kept multiple wives, it was already commendable that he remained faithful to me in the capital and never brought his northern concubine before me. Perhaps I shouldn't hate him either. After all, to outsiders, my life appeared one of wealth and honor, blessed with numerous descendants. Yet seeing them huddled together, exchanging tender whispers, a chill crept into my heart. In the capital's general's residence, I walked on eggshells, striving to protect our small family. When war raged, I sold my dowry to send provisions and medicine to the northern front. While he indulged in sweet nothings with another in the north, where did that leave me? That alone would have been enough. I was nearly the same age as this old woman. Why hadn't he considered that he might never see me again? Perhaps he had considered it. Only the person he wished to spend his twilight years with wasn't me. The injustices piled up, and within this northern frontier general's mansion, a series of cold, sinister winds began to stir because of me. This only drew the two of them closer together, fueling my fury. My spirit form began to solidify, white hair whipped wildly, black nails grew frantically long. My bloodshot eyes appeared in their horrified gazes as I lunged viciously. Alas! A sigh echoed through the frigid sky. Then, a strand of ice descended from the heavens, binding me effortlessly. Even as a vengeful spirit, I still couldn't withstand such trials. "Well, since I'm in a good mood today, I'll grant you another chance at life. This time, you must not disappoint." A sudden chill swept down from the sky, dousing my soul, engulfed in flames of hatred, as if drenched by a bucket of ice water. Before long, I lost consciousness. When I awoke, I lay in a dark cave, the sound of another's breathing beside me. I shuddered in fright. Glancing around, the scene felt strangely familiar. To confirm my suspicion, I reached out and touched the back of the person beside me. Sure enough, I felt a cross-shaped scar. I was certain. This was Jiangli. Was this the moment, years ago when I came of age, that I rescued Jiangli from the mountains after he'd been poisoned by a love potion? I recalled the sigh that had come from the sky just before I lost consciousness, and a bold suspicion took root in my heart. I had been reborn. Before he regained consciousness, I groped for my clothes, slipped them on quietly, and left the cave. By moonlight, I made my way down the mountain. I remembered how he had tormented me in my past life, only waking me the next morning at daybreak. Back then, the cave was dark. Only when I dressed and stepped into the sunlight did he relax upon seeing me. Since we were already betrothed and mutually affectionate, even if something inappropriate happened prematurely, it wasn't considered a major scandal. But in this life, I didn't want him to know it was me who saved him. The mountain path was slippery and treacherous on that spring night. I walked until dawn, finally reaching the gates of the capital city. Hiding in an unseen spot, I tidied my clothes and hair before strolling through the city gate, returning to the thatched cottage my grandfather had built. Though my grandfather had once held the office of chancellor, he lived a life of integrity. He possessed no grand mansion, only this thatched cottage and the 10 acres of land surrounding it, granted by His Majesty. These 10 acres lay beside the bustling Vermilion Bird Avenue. My grandfather had intended to build a courtyard here. But with empty pockets, he could only fence it off with a simple hedge, planting a few vegetables. Most of the land lay fallow, overgrown with weeds year after year. In the capital, where every inch of land was precious, it was a truly extraordinary sight. My parents passed away early, and after my grandfather's death, all he left me was this plot of land, the thatched cottage, and a marriage contract with Jiangli of the general's mansion. Battling my discomfort, I went to the kitchen to boil a pot of water, cleansing myself before gently cradling my lower abdomen. Though I resented Jiangli, I never blamed my child. These 2 children were the only ones I ever had with Jiangli, conceived unexpectedly. My constitution was weak. Giving birth to twins had damaged my body beyond the possibility of conceiving again. By now, those 2 little lives must have taken root within me. Thinking of the day I would depart, surrounded by descendants crying until their eyes were red, I found myself anticipating the arrival of these 2 children. But in this life, they would have no connection to the general's mansion. After dressing, I retrieved the marriage contract and a piece of white jade from the cabinet, placed them in a small box, and carried it toward the general's residence. The gatekeeper, recognizing me, immediately ushered me into the main hall and sent word to the old general and his wife. Surveying the familiar sights and objects within the compound, my throat tightened with emotion. I, the granddaughter of the esteemed chancellor, had immersed myself in poetry and classics since childhood, blessed with a photographic memory. My grandfather raised me as a son from my earliest years, teaching me statecraft, military strategy, astronomy, geography, all the arts of governance. Yet, simply because I was born a woman, I could not take the imperial examinations like men, nor serve in the court as an official. Because I fell in love with a man, I was confined within these 4 walls, trapped for a lifetime. In my previous life, I toiled diligently within these halls, cautious and careful, fearing I might fail as a lady of the inner quarters. Yet in the end, I discovered the pillar that had sustained my entire existence was a lie. Ha! Truly, human love is the most laughable thing in this world. Recalling the past, I waited in the main hall for a full half-hour before General Jiang and Lady Luo finally arrived, dawdling as they came. Oh! How is it that Junyu has time to visit today? Lady Luo feigned warmth as she took my hand, her smile plastered on her face, yet her eyes held only cold indifference. Ever since my grandfather passed, their attitude toward me had lost all trace of its former warmth. And why wouldn't it? Without my grandfather, I was merely an orphaned girl with a modicum of literary talent. How could I possibly be worthy of their precious son? In my previous life, Jiangli and I unexpectedly became intimate, and I soon found myself pregnant. They had no choice but to grudgingly accept me. Had it not been for that incident, they would surely have found an opportunity to dissolve this ill-suited marriage. Though they later maintained a semblance of civility toward me for the sake of their grandchildren, their disdain remained palpable. Whenever the household required managing affairs or entertaining guests, they always entrusted the second daughter-in-law, born into the minister's family, to handle it, fearful I might bring them shame. Recalling these past events, I withdrew my hand from Luosher's grasp, opened the box, and took out the marriage contract along with the jade pendant given as a token of betrothal. I thrust them into her hands. Her expression hardened instantly. With Lyre preparing for the military examinations, forcing this marriage now shows utter lack of consideration, she said coldly. General Zhang's face darkened as well. I only gave a cold laugh, uncle and aunt, you misunderstand. I never consented to this marriage from childhood, grandfather forced me to accept it. Now that he's passed, I wish to dissolve this engagement. You see. What? General Jiang and Lady Luo never expected I'd come to break off the marriage, let alone with such disdain for their son. Anger flared instantly within them. Lin Junyu, how can you be so unfilial? Your grandfather's body isn't even cold yet, and you dare speak such words. Besides, how could my son not be worthy of you? Why such contempt? That they disliked this match was one thing, but being publicly humiliated by my coming to break it off, how could they possibly accept that? My gaze remained calm as I looked at them. In my younger days, even the slightest hint of displeasure from Lady Luo or General Jiang would have made me so anxious I couldn't eat. But now, my soul feels older than theirs, and I know them all too well. Why should I be afraid? So, General, will your household accept this annulment or not? I stood before them, expression neutral, asking neither submissively nor arrogantly. Madame Luo gritted her teeth. Though humiliated, refusing the annulment and marrying this unfilial daughter-in-law would be like swallowing shit. Just as they fumed, unsure how to save face, Jiangli finally returned. Hearing from the gatekeeper that I was here, he hurried toward the main hall. Junyu, why are you here today? I was just about to speak with you. You came to call off the engagement? After hearing the full story, Jiangli stared at me in disbelief. Though only 18, years of martial arts training had given him a mature bearing. Yet his youth still burned fiercely within him, his temper was quick, his emotions impossible to contain. He gazed at me blankly, his eyes brimming with profound disappointment, then slowly filling with anger. Why? You like someone else? I shook my head, finding his expression laughable. In his youth, he had truly adored me. Perhaps in a past life, he had always loved me. But that love needn't be solely for me. He might even love someone else more. Staying away from the capital for 3 years, just to grow old with that person. Thinking of this, I couldn't bring myself to give him a kind look. In this life, I wanted nothing more to do with him. Every word I spoke was aimed straight at his heart. Grandfather once deemed young Master Jiang a suitable match and arranged this marriage behind my back, never once asking my opinion. Now that grandfather has passed, I've thought it over and decided to call off this marriage. After all, life is long. I refuse to entrust my future to someone I neither desire nor feel anything for. Those 4 words, no desire, no feeling, struck Jiangli like a thunderclap. He couldn't comprehend how I could utter such words. After all, we had already confessed our deepest feelings to each other and rejoiced for so long over our mutual affection. He cautiously moved closer to me, but I coldly took a step back. He was utterly heartbroken, his eyes red and unblinking as he stared at me. No feelings, no interest? Then what about your vow to know each other forever, never to fade? I sneered. In my past life, I loved him deeply, yet he built another family in the northern frontier. What was I to him then? A fart. Just like his solemn vows of eternal devotion and lifelong companionship, all farts. Jiangli was still young, unable to bear such a blow. Anger welled up, threatening to spill over into tears. Madame Luo immediately felt heartbroken. Son, don't be angry, don't be angry. Such a woman isn't worth keeping. Break off the engagement. Break it off. We'll call it off. But Jiangli shook his head, clenching his teeth and glaring at me with such ferocity it seemed he wanted to devour me alive. I won't call it off. Lin Junyu, you're mine in life and mine in death. You've tangled with me, don't even think about shaking me off. But I fixed my gaze on General Jiang and Lady Luo. Marriage is decided by parents and matchmakers, not by Jiangli. Old General, Madam, make your decision now. Madame Luo's eyes flickered as she exchanged a glance with General Jiang. I knew she didn't want to miss this chance. In my past life, she believed I held Jiangli back. Without the backing of the powerful Yu family, he always lagged behind others in promotions and honors. Enemies should be reconciled, not deepened. Withdraw. General Jiang's decisive hammer strike sealed the matter. Jiang Li's face drained of color. He stared at me, utterly devastated, as if the sky had fallen. Then he drew a jade butterfly hairpin from his sleeve, gazing at me with a cold smile. No regrets? My heart skipped a beat. This was my most cherished hairpin, likely the one I dropped in the cave yesterday and never retrieved. Yet my expression remained composed, tinged with a hint of delight. I lost this hairpin a couple days ago. I never imagined you'd find it. It's a keepsake from my mother. I must ask you to return it, young Master Jiang. Then, I pulled a 50-tael silver note from my bosom and handed it to him. This is your reward. Jiang Li looked at the note I offered, his expression bleak. It's not necessary. He pressed the hairpin into my hand, his lips slightly pursed. He stared at me for a moment longer, then turned and walked away, his shoulders slumped. Madame Luo grew ever more protective of her son, her disdain for me intensifying. She immediately had General Jiang draft a document annulling the marriage. Emerging from the general's residence, I held the annulment papers in my hand, feeling a profound sense of relief. In my past life, the general's mansion had been like a vast prison to me. Now, finally free of it, my spirits soared. I headed toward the capital's most famous snack street, Hefang, intending to buy a few pastries to savor at my leisure. In my old age during my previous life, I developed a condition where eating sweets caused dizziness, headaches, numb limbs, and blurred vision. After turning 40, I rarely indulged in sweets. Now, having returned to my youth, I naturally craved to satisfy that longing. The walk to Hefang Street took a quarter of an hour. Stepping into the capital's most renowned Chungsatang shop, I gazed at the pastry models displayed on the counter, my mouth watering at the sight. Cherry Bilo, Moon Palace Cake, Snowflake Crisp, Dainai Cake, Dragon's Whisker Crisp, Pineapple Cake, Jujube Paste Walnut Cake, Top Scholar Cake. The variety was overwhelming. You've been looking for a while now. Are you buying or not? You're making me dizzy. Don't tell me you're just window shopping to satisfy your cravings because you can't afford them? The shopkeeper of Chungsatang remained unhurried, but a young girl who entered after me grew impatient. I turned to look and found her features strangely familiar. After some effort, I realized she bore a striking resemblance to one of Jiang Li's concubines from my past life, the one he kept in the northern frontier. When she noticed my cold stare, she seemed flustered. Under my gaze, she bought a box of cherry biles and a box of Moon Palace cakes. Then she thrust one box of cherry biles into my hands, offering a slightly embarrassed smile. My young master is eager to eat the Moon Palace cakes. I spoke a bit too hastily earlier. Please accept this box of cherry biles as an apology. Surprised, I accepted the cherry pastries and asked curiously, how did you know I like these? You've looked at them 3 times already. Even a fool could see that. Now, I must go, I'm running late, and the young master will scold me. Watching her dash out the door, pastries in hand, her lightness like a bird's flight. In that instant, I suddenly understood why Jiang Li had preferred staying with her in the northern frontier in my past life. Compared to her, I, long bound by the general's household rules, a proper lady of the inner quarters who must tailor every smile and frown to please the matriarch, was utterly devoid of charm. But I too had once been a girl as bright as spring. Returning to the thatched cottage with the cherry pie, my face dark, I sat before the bronze mirror in my bedroom and gazed at the young girl reflected within. She was fair and lovely, her face like a lotus blossom, her brows like willow leaves, her skin as white as snow, her black hair cascading like a waterfall. She was in the prime of her youth. I tried to smile coquettishly, as I had in childhood. Yet in that instant, I understood how perfectly the phrase "a smile that doesn't reach the eyes" described me. My outer shell was young and beautiful, but my core was utterly exhausted. I nibbled at the cherry brioche, its sweet, cloying taste lifting my spirits somewhat. I placed a hand on my lower abdomen, longing for the arrival of a son or daughter, while simultaneously pondering how I might bear them openly and legitimately. After all, losing one's virginity before marriage in these times meant being drowned in a pig's cage. The next day, I went back to Hefang Street, this time walking all the way to its end. The end of Hefang Street led to Yuehu Street, the capital's most notorious gathering place for the lowest of the low. Yuehu Street was bustling, teeming with people and crowded with vendors. Girls from brothels leaned out of windows, waving silk scarves at passers-by. I nervously circled the street corner, about to turn away, when I spotted a blood-soaked hand peeking from behind a large tree nearby. Startled, I trembled and hurried over. There lay a scholar, covered in blood. He was gaunt, his cheeks hollowed, scarcely any flesh remaining. Yet his skin was pale, and his features held a certain noble spirit. My gaze instinctively fell to his groin, blood gushed freely. That part had been slashed by something, nearly severed. I gasped, covering my eyes in haste. What a stroke of luck! In a past life, it was said that Xiaoyu, the newly crowned top scholar, was a eunuch by birth. After being assigned to the Ministry of Rites, he was repeatedly humiliated because of it. Humiliated to the point of being unable to continue his official duties, Xiaoyu petitioned the emperor to transfer him to the Eastern Factory. Within years, he became the most ruthless and cunning of the 9,000 lords within the Eastern Factory. Those who had once humiliated him were all dealt with in the Autumn Reckoning. Later, he wielded absolute power, standing second only to the emperor himself. Yet I saw him in the temple, kneeling before the Buddha with profound devotion. Even if I could so shut the mouths of all under heaven, I could never find joy. I only wished to be a normal person, even if only in others' eyes. To have a handful of children, a small family of my own, even if the children aren't biologically mine. I hope he can keep his word. So I paid to have him carried to the finest clinic in the capital. The proprietor knew me well and summoned their most skilled surgeon to treat Xiaoyu's wounds. Seeing me pacing anxiously in the waiting room, the proprietor asked with puzzlement, the gentleman inside. "Who is he to you, young lady?" I gave a light laugh. "My husband." "Ah." The proprietor's expression stiffened, his face filled with confusion. "But isn't your fiancé the legitimate son of General Jiang?" "This." I offered a faint smile, offering no further explanation, only saying, "I've broken off the engagement with the Jiang family." This news would come out eventually, so I might as well tell it myself. Hearing this, the proprietor couldn't help but look at me with pity. To some, after my grandfather's death, I held no value to the aristocratic families. This marriage falling through was hardly surprising. Still, most people trusted General Jiang's character. After all, in his youth, he was renowned for his loyalty and honor. In the gambling dens, some had even placed bets at 10-to-1 odds. I currently have no income. Yesterday, before heading to the general's residence, I passed by a gambling house. Wearing my veil, I placed a bet of 1,000 taels. In a couple of days, once the general's residence gives the go-ahead, I'll collect my winnings. 1,000 taels turning into 10,000, just thinking about it makes me happy. Since you are the young lady's husband, we shall do our utmost to treat him. Rest assured, young lady. M.H.M. Thank you, shopkeeper. It wasn't until evening that the elderly physician treating Xiaoyu's external wounds emerged, wiping sweat from his brow. He smiled warmly at me. "You brought him in just in time. Though the patient sustained multiple knife wounds, none are life-threatening. As for his ability to father children, that depends on his fate." "Thank you, doctor." Due to the nature of his injuries, the medications were extremely costly. After paying 150 taels for the consultation, the clinic kindly arranged for several apprentices to carry him back to my thatched cottage. While he remained unconscious, I prepared some medicinal porridge. By the time it was cooked, he slowly regained consciousness. He looked around in confusion, his gaze finally settling on his bound groin, still pierced by a straw tube, his expression darkening. Cough. I stood at the doorway, bowl of porridge in hand, my face flushing as I awkwardly turned away. He immediately pulled the blanket over himself, but his hasty movement tugged at other wounds, causing him to gasp in pain. "You saved me?" I nodded, placed the table on the small bedside stand, pulled up a chair, and sat beside his bed, not for free. "You owe me a favor. Otherwise, I'll throw you out right now. Those who hurt you are surely still lurking in the shadows." "Threatening me?" He raised an eyebrow, his dark eyes fixed on me coldly. A chill ran down my spine, as if a venomous snake had locked onto me. I sucked in a sharp breath, suddenly sensing something off about his aura. In my past life, I'd seen the top scholar paraded through the streets, truly riding high on the winds of fortune. That youth, though afflicted, shone like sunlight, never succumbing to despair. His temperament changed after facing official setbacks and colleagues' humiliation. But this man before me felt too heavy. Where was the youthful exuberance? Like me, he possessed a young shell, yet his core was utterly weary. Well, we really are a perfect match. Not exactly a threat, more like repaying a favor. I smiled gently at him. My past life had taught me to maintain this placid expression no matter the time or place. Yeah. The kind where the smile is on the surface but not in the heart. He stared at me for a moment before snorting coldly, "That smile is ugly. Don't ever smile again." I withdrew my smile and nodded, "So will you help me or not?" After I explained my situation to Xiaoyu, he stared at me in silence for a long time before sighing, "Heaven's playing a cruel joke on us." I nodded in agreement. Both of us had been reborn after the events unfolded, and it truly felt like we'd been tricked. But unlike him, I longed to reunite with the children from my past life. They'd never wronged me, and I loved them deeply. "All right. I'll marry into your family, become a father to your children, but you must support me from now on. The kids will only call me Dad, and I'll name them myself. I'll raise them personally." You don't have to be so eager. But thinking of how he'd been utterly alone in his past life, my heart ached. Some people don't cherish their families or children, yet others dream of having a home even if that home never truly belonged to them. The next day, I had someone move Xiaoyu's belongings from the low-income housing on Moon Lake Street to the thatched cottage. With both our household registrations, I went to the prefectural office to obtain the marriage contract. Thus, we became husband and wife. Over half a month later, the general's residence finally relented, acknowledging our annulment. They then hurriedly reached out to the Minister of Revenue, arranging a match with his eldest legitimate daughter. That morning, upon hearing the news, Xiaoyu, now able to walk again, let out a cold laugh, a military commander cozying up to the Ministry of Revenue, especially this minister who'll be out of office soon. General Zhang's got neither brains nor foresight. I nodded in agreement while counting the silver. After the general's residence announced the news, I went to the gambling house to collect my share of the winnings. 10,000 taels. My hands cramped from counting. I shook them out, scanning the room, wondering where best to hide the money. Seeing my expression, Xiaoyu snorted lightly, "You little miser." Truth be told, when I had the money transported back today, several taels followed behind. But upon reaching the thatched cottage and surveying the surroundings, they all silently retreated. This was along Suzaku Avenue in the capital, where high officials and nobles resided. My grandfather dedicated his life to the nation, still reviewing documents in the palace until his death. Moreover, he was famously generous, distributing his entire lifetime's salary to commoners until his death, living out his days in a humble thatched cottage. So what if his beloved granddaughter won 10,000 taels of silver at the gambling house to make ends meet? Xiaoyu claimed this 10,000 taels was preserved for me through my grandfather's noble virtue. Of course I know. Lin Junyu. Jiang Li's cry suddenly echoed from outside the courtyard. I paused, hesitated, then rose to go out. Xiaoyu grabbed my arm. "Shall I accompany you?" I shook my head, leaving him behind as I stepped outside. Outside the courtyard gate, Jiang Li stood looking haggard. Seeing me emerge, his gaze fixed on me blankly before instantly turning furious and disappointed. I heard. "You bet on yourself at the gambling house. If I called off our engagement, you'd win 10,000 taels, right? You schemed even this far. What have I been to you all these years?" "Yes. What did you think I was to you, when I gave you everything in my past life?" I met his gaze coldly, but he suddenly turned his head away, fists clenched, his voice trembling. "Don't look at me like that. It makes me feel like a fool." I withdrew my gaze and turned away. I didn't want to see the face of the young man who once loved me madly. I simply couldn't understand how someone who loved me so deeply could abandon me in the end, secretly loving another. "I hear you've become engaged to the eldest daughter of the minister's household, and I too have found another husband. Gossip is a terrible thing. Don't come here again. WH. What? You're married?" As if struck by a thunderbolt, his entire frame slumped, his back bowing. He turned his face toward me, staring blankly. "When did this happen?" "Half a month ago." "Ha! Half a month? So you found someone new right after breaking off our engagement? He glared at me furiously, a sudden flash of madness in his eyes. His eyes reddened as he strode toward me. I instinctively clutched my lower abdomen and stumbled backward. Just as my feet slipped and I nearly fell, I landed against a broad chest. "My lady, are you all right?" Hearing Xiaoyu's voice, I exhaled in relief. I almost fell. If I miscarried, I'd never see my son or daughter. "Let her go. Junyu is mine. Mine." Jiangli, eyes bloodshot, lunged forward, reaching for my hand. Xiaoyu shielded me, only to be knocked to the ground by Jiangli. As Jiangli raised his massive fist to Xiaoyu's face, I grabbed a wooden stick by the door and smashed it into Jiangli's back of the head. His eyes rolled back, and he collapsed unconscious onto Xiaoyu's chest. Xiaoyu, already covered in wounds, coughed violently under the weight. I hurriedly moved him aside and helped Xiaoyu up. Coughing, Xiaoyu chuckled, "That man's strength is like a wild bull. I thought he'd beat me to death. Who knew you had such power too?" I sighed, gazing at the unconscious Jiangli on the floor. He possesses innate divine strength, a prodigy in martial arts, and a natural military genius. Xiaoyu nodded, his gaze complex as he watched Jiangli. "Such talent is rare. What a pity, we truly can't kill him." Seeing Xiaoyu's face filled with regret, I couldn't help but feel speechless. He'd likely considered sparing the son to avenge the father, but with Jiangli involved, it simply couldn't be done. In my past life, Jiangli was nearly unbeatable in battle. Even in the bleakest moments, he could turn the tide against overwhelming odds. To the common folk, he was a war god, 100 times more formidable than his father. The great Qian Empire's frontiers need talents like Jiangli. So no matter how much I resent him, I won't destroy him. The great Qian kingdom had no true replacement for him. But as for the general's mansion? I had no intention of letting them off easy. Still, I couldn't just let him off scot-free. Xiaoyu stroked his chin, an idea forming: strip him naked, toss him into a brothel, then write a letter to the Minister of Revenue. Tell him to keep a close eye on his son-in-law, lest he bring shame upon himself everywhere he goes. I raised my eyebrows in surprise. Why send it to the minister's residence instead of General Jiang? Are you trying to sever the alliance between the two families? Xiaoyu nodded, his gaze turning icy. The Minister of Revenue is a treacherous dog who's been selling out his country for years. He's got plenty of dirty secrets. We can't let him defile our great Qian dynasty's natural military talent. Jiangli should only die on the frontier battlefield. True to Xiaoyu's nature, he exacts revenge for personal grievances while also considering the nation's interests. Especially that unscrupulous approach, I must learn from him. Like stripping Jiangli naked and tossing him to the courtesans. Though it won't hurt him physically, it will strip him of all dignity. That would be a small measure of revenge for me, and it would leave the Minister of Revenue with a bone stuck in his throat. Killing two birds with one stone. Xiaoyu was still recovering from his injuries. But moving someone like that wasn't a task for a pregnant woman like me. Xiaoyu asked me for a tale of silver. After wandering around outside for a while, he found 2 beggars and had them carry Jiangli to the Chufeng Pavilion. Later, I heard that when Jiangli woke up in the Chufeng Pavilion, he first flew into a rage, then sank into deep sorrow. The most amusing part was that one courtesan insisted she'd shared an intimate moment with him, demanding he buy her freedom and take responsibility. Just as the commotion reached its peak, the Minister of Revenue arrived with a letter to catch them in the act. Seeing Jiangli clutched by the courtesan, both scantily clad, he found the scene utterly absurd and utterly humiliating. His hair stood on end with fury, and he immediately went to the Jiang residence to annul the betrothal. In an instant, Jiangli became the talk of the capital, the subject of everyone's gossip over tea and meals. After being taken back by the general's household, Jiangli fell gravely ill. Once recovered, he never came to trouble me again. It was as if he had completely forgotten me, spending his days immersed in the martial arts training grounds, claiming he was preparing for the autumn military examinations. I paid little attention to these developments. It was Xiaoyu who had someone inquire and relay the news to me. Meanwhile, word of my marriage had spread far and wide. Eyewitnesses had seen Jiangli come to provoke me, only to be sent to the Chufeng Pavilion by us. We made no effort to conceal this incident. The general's household knew of it, but they were the ones who had acted wrongly in the first place. General Jiang, after all, valued his reputation. Following the incident, he shut his doors to visitors, and the entire general's mansion grew considerably more low-key. 9 months later, I gave birth to a son and a daughter. This time around, I hadn't entered the general's mansion. I was spared the daily morning and evening visits to the elders, the veiled insults from my mother-in-law Lady Luo, and the need for constant vigilance in my words and actions. Thus, my pregnancy passed in ease and comfort. With silver at hand, I frequently invited physicians and midwives to monitor my condition. Armed with the experience of my past life, everything proceeded smoothly from start to finish. Both children were plump and fair-skinned, not frail and monkey-like as in my previous existence. Xiaoyu, in particular, surprised me with his devotion. During my late pregnancy, he guarded me daily with utmost care, fetching tea and water, attending to my every need. He even kept vigil outside my room at night, dreading any mishap. Later, when the weather turned cold, I couldn't bear to see him suffer so. I simply set up a sleeping mat inside and invited him to rest there. Yet he worried I might feel uncomfortable. I only said, "We are husband and wife in this life. We must grow accustomed to each other. It's only a matter of time." He paused slightly, then accepted it cheerfully. The thatched cottage was old and dilapidated, and it wasn't appropriate to renovate during my pregnancy. Now that the child had arrived safely and we had some silver, we hired masons to build a clean, beautiful wall of blue bricks around the house. In the front yard, we arranged a garden and built a library to house all the books my grandfather had collected throughout his life. The backyard became a vegetable garden, with a 3-courtyard house built in the center. It wasn't extravagant, but it was comfortable to live in. A plaque hung above the courtyard gate, bearing characters my grandfather had written long ago, "Book Dwelling." What my grandfather never managed to complete in his lifetime finally found its conclusion through me. Whenever I thought of this, my heart would ache with bittersweet sorrow. My grandfather's life was marked by loss. He lost his parents in his youth, his wife in middle age, and my mother passed away from illness the year I was born. My father, his only son, vanished without a trace on the northern frontier battlefield. Grandfather raised me from infancy while managing state affairs. So impoverished were they that they couldn't even afford a wet nurse. I was raised by the collective care of the elderly women in our neighborhood. Thus, after giving birth, my joyful news spread far and wide, to the nobles and commoners alike, and naturally, to the general's residence. Most people came to offer gifts in succession. Setting aside the offerings from the nobility, even the ordinary citizens of the city brought generous gifts of cloth and eggs. The general's household didn't come, which was to be expected. The broken engagement had already soured relations between our families. 20 years ago, my grandfather saved old Master Jiang's life. The Jiang family showered him with gratitude, but once old Master Jiang passed, that kindness faded. After I married into their household in my previous life, they never once mentioned this debt. If I ever casually mentioned old Master Jiang, the younger Jiang sisters would accuse me of exploiting their gratitude for personal gain. Despite my intelligence, I wasn't subjected to exceptional mistreatment in that household. I eventually gained control of the general's household finances, freeing Jiangli from domestic concerns. Yet every time I applied the governance strategies my grandfather taught me to the hidden intrigues of the inner quarters, my heart ached unbearably. What others saw as wealth and comfort felt like a prison to me. After my death, learning Jiangli had taken another wife and refused to return home to grow old with me only deepened my rage and resentment. Well, in this life, I need no longer be confined to the inner quarters. Xiaoyu adored his daughter and insisted she take his surname, naming her Xiaoyundan. My son bears my surname Lin, named Lin Fengqing. Thus, my grandfather has descendants after all. He said a loyal minister must not die childless, for if he cannot protect his own offspring, who in this world would willingly serve as a loyal minister? I found this reasoning profoundly sound. Later, I reflected on my grandfather's lifelong aspiration. He wished for scholars across the land to study the great classics. All books should be accessible to the public, not hoarded away, lest they be destroyed or civilization suffer a rupture. He said we must preserve the spirit of civilization to usher in a new golden age. Though my grandfather has passed, I wish his spirit to endure forever. Thus, I posted an announcement opening the library to the public, inviting scholars from all corners to study its treasures. I specified that texts could be copied but not removed. Little did I know I had underestimated my grandfather's standing in the world. The very next day after posting the notice, it drew not only scholars and students but also the Grand Scholar of the Imperial Academy and most of the court's high ministers. This was beyond my expectations, and soon the house and courtyard were packed to the brim. Wiping cold sweat from my brow, I closed the doors to visitors before nightfall. I announced new rules must be established to prevent today's chaos from recurring. Fortunately, these were all learned and courteous individuals. They all agreed to return home and await further notice. While I was overwhelmed, Xiaoyu sat leisurely in the back courtyard, rocking the children and sipping tea. Returning to the courtyard, I saw his relaxed demeanor and felt inexplicably irritated. Especially the look in his eyes when he glanced at me, a hint of schadenfreude. My teeth gritted as I shot him a cold stare. Did you know this would happen? He shushed me with a soft shhh, gently coaxing the two children to sleep before pulling me toward the inner chamber's bathing room. A large tub was filled with clear water and pebbles. Hot water was already prepared. My lady, please soak in this bath first. Take time to consider tomorrow's arrangements. Your husband will prepare dinner. I sank comfortably into the tub, thinking of how the 9,000, feared by all in my past life, had transformed into a domesticated husband for my two children. He now revolved around the hired wet nurse daily, tending to me with meticulous care. I should have been happy, yet this man seemed to have lost his ambition. With the imperial examinations approaching, he actually refused to participate, citing childcare as his reason. I suppose it stems from his past life's bitter experiences in officialdom, followed by his role as the leader of the eunuchs in the Eastern factory. Though he held supreme power, he still lacked dignity. Recalling what he said before the Buddha, I could understand. He simply wanted a small family and to live as a normal person. Very well. Since he has married into my Lin family, I shall provide for him. Then my thoughts turned to tomorrow's arrangements, how to encourage everyone to read without disrupting order. Perhaps the day's busyness had taken its toll, my body hadn't rested properly. Lost in thought, drowsiness enveloped me, and I gradually drifted off. In my dream, I actually saw my grandfather. He looked at me with his usual gentleness, took 10 taels from his own salary, and pressed them into my hand. Grandpa can't be with you anymore, dear. Take this to buy flowers to wear, or treats you like. Don't always hold back, and don't shortchange yourself. As I took the silver, memories of my past life flooded me. All the grievances welled up, and I clung to him, sobbing, "Grandfather, I missed you so much. Did you think I lived too miserably? That's why you never appeared in my dreams last lifetime?" Grandfather stroked my head tenderly. "My dear, what's past is past. Consider it all a dream. It wasn't a matter of life and death between you and them. There's no need to dwell on revenge. If you live well, those who wish you ill will naturally find no joy in their own lives. In the end, when you thrive and they suffer, isn't that a satisfying outcome?" This was grandfather's philosophy of life, which earned him the respect and affection of all. Even the prime minister of a rival nation, who had regarded him as a lifelong enemy, composed a poem in his memory after his passing. "Grandfather, in this life, your granddaughter will live well and make this existence worthwhile." My dearest granddaughter. When I awoke, I was already in bed, dressed in my favorite undergarments. Xiaoyu entered carrying a steaming bowl of noodles. "I saw you hadn't emerged from the washroom for ages, so I sent the children's wet nurse to check. Sure enough, you'd fallen asleep in the bathtub. Didn't you fear drowning?" "Thank you." "Don't thank me. Thank the children's wet nurse who dragged you out of the tub and changed your clothes." He handed me the noodles, 2 golden fried eggs nestled atop the white noodles. "I'm thanking you for making the noodles," I retorted, annoyed. Taking the bowl, I hesitated for a moment, staring at his hands that should have held a writing brush. "Go buy some reliable servants. Keeping you confined to the inner quarters is truly a waste." He shook his head and chuckled softly. "I once believed a gentleman should never enter the kitchen, but now I find my heart belongs to the small home in the back courtyard. You needn't feel burdened. Besides, I've been to those lofty heights, they hold no joy for me. Recalling his cold, gloomy nature in a past life, yet seeing his increasingly frequent smiles now, I let the matter rest. After eating the noodles, I went to the next room to check on our children. Seeing them sleeping soundly, I kissed each on the forehead, growing fonder of them with every glance. In my past life, as they grew up, our affectionate gestures grew fewer, and our conversations gradually grew distant. By the time they started their own families, the most intimate thing we'd do was a brief hug when we couldn't help ourselves. Later, as I grew older, I'd watch them leave hurriedly with their own families after visiting me. I could only suppress the ache in my heart, hiding behind the door to watch them fade into the distance. That is why, in this life, being able to raise them once more fills me with profound joy. The next day, I reposted the notice. The book house is currently under poor management and will remain temporarily closed to the public, but the future holds promise. Then, I retrieved my grandfather's notebook. He once remarked that woodblock printing was too time-consuming and labor-intensive. If characters could be disassembled and reassembled to create new books for printing, it would reduce costs and carving time. Furthermore, the paper used for printing should be cheaper and more accessible to the common people, thereby enabling the widespread dissemination of knowledge and civilization. Both ideas were musings from my grandfather's final years, spent lingering on his sickbed. He said that if successful, they would surely benefit all mankind. Grandfather's notes were somewhat disorganized, yet they detailed how to deconstruct woodblock printing. I became engrossed, studying day and night for half a month straight, endlessly disassembling and reassembling wooden blocks. Once I had a rough idea, I sought out a carpenter to make a test plate, but the results were unsatisfactory. Either the movable type blocks swelled when wet, or the ink bled through the paper. Moreover, the paper was extremely expensive, and so was the ink. That evening at dinner, Xiaoyu saw me distracted, picking at my chopsticks without eating. He sighed deeply. "You've been working in isolation these days. Why not spend more time wandering the streets? You might get some fresh ideas." I nodded, set down my bowl, and was about to head out. But he grabbed my head and pressed it down. "Finish your meal first." "Oh!" I obediently ate, though my mind quickly filled with a jumble of thoughts again. The next day, heeding Xiaoyu's advice, I wandered the streets. Passing by Chuanxi Hall, I was unexpectedly overcome by cravings. I stepped inside intending to buy some treats to bring back and let Xiaoyu try them too. Unexpectedly, I ran into the 3 young ladies from the general's mansion. When they spotted me, their previously cheerful expressions instantly turned cold and grim. The third Miss Jiang rolled her eyes at me, her face dripping with contempt. "Oh, isn't this the ungrateful wretch? Brother treated her so well, yet she gambled away their marriage, winning 10,000 taels of silver to support her poor little lover in the slums. Ha! What an ungrateful dog!" I shook my head at her, smiling faintly as I pulled a stack of IOUs from my bosom. "Since you've chosen to present yourself before me in this public setting, don't blame me for being blunt." The 3 sisters watched the stack of notes I produced, their brows furrowing as they exchanged glances, a vague sense of unease creeping over them. Yet, being noble ladies of distinguished families, they couldn't simply flee in panic at my air of mystery. The 4th Miss Jiang glared at me, her expression dark. "What do you mean by this?" I looked at these 3 girls, pampered and ignorant of the world, knowing only the intrigues of the inner quarters, with pity. I spoke slowly. 20 years ago, my grandfather saved the life of the late old Master Jiang. 10 years ago, when General Jiang was trapped in Blackwind Fort, it was my grandfather who lent silver to the Jiang family to ransom him. In the years that followed, when the Jiang family's business suffered losses, they borrowed thousands of taels of silver from us repeatedly to weather the crisis. As my grandfather's health declined, he believed the Jiang family would never treat me unfairly given his kindness to them. That's how the marriage between me and your brother came to be. Now, my grandfather has been gone for 4 years. My mourning period ended a year ago, yet the general's household still hadn't come to propose. When I took the token to your residence, I passed a gambling house and saw the wagers people had placed on me. Grief overwhelmed me. Others could see it clearly. Why was I so blind? I decided to gamble everything on myself. Sure enough, upon entering your residence, your father declared my timing for marriage demands was wrong. The 3 young ladies knew nothing of these inner workings, nor of Lady Luo's intentions. Hearing me speak of it now in public, they knew trouble had come. They exchanged glances, seeking a quiet retreat, but I blocked the doorway. I waved the IOU in my hand. While organizing my grandfather's books recently, I uncovered these decades-old debt notes. After tallying them, the total exceeded 3,000 taels, equivalent to my grandfather's salary for 3 years. I'd always wondered why my grandfather, who served as chancellor his entire life, couldn't even afford to build a house. Now I see, it was because he encountered debt dodgers. Now that our families have no marital ties, I implore your noble general's mansion to abandon such thuggish tactics and repay the silver promptly. Surrounded by pointing fingers, the 3 young ladies' expressions darkened. Spoiled since childhood, they knew nothing of the general's mansion's deep-rooted corruption. Now that I've exposed them, they realize the grave trouble they've caused. Trapped here by me, they immediately flew into a rage. Nonsense. Both your grandfather and mine have been dead for so long, who can prove those IOUs are genuine? You might just be deliberately smearing us. Zhang's third daughter, at least somewhat sharp-witted, retorted with a dark expression. This prince can prove it. An elderly voice suddenly echoed from the doorway. I turned to see the venerable Prince Yen, well over 70, standing outside Chunshi Hall with a displeased expression. Who knew how long he'd been standing there, listening to everything? Your Highness, Prince Yen. My eyes instantly welled up as I knelt to pay my respects. Upon recognizing the old man's status, everyone inside and outside the room immediately knelt in unison. The wise prince ordered me to hand him the IOUs. He flipped through them briefly before nodding. I was present when these were written. Your Jiang family is utterly shameless. That old fool Lin Shihao, his eyesight grows worse with age, his mind clouded. To entrust his precious granddaughter to ungrateful wretches like you. The 3 Jiang sisters knelt pale-faced on the ground, looking as if they might faint at any moment. They had merely slandered me once, yet the entire general's mansion's reputation was utterly ruined because of that single word. I sighed softly, thinking to myself, I wonder if Lady Luo will be driven mad upon hearing this news. For in my past life, when Lady Luo grew senile, she rambled and spilled all these sordid secrets. She only mentioned that the silver grandfather Jiang owed my grandfather was indeed repaid. But each time, it was entrusted to Lady Luo to return. Yet during those years, Lady Luo's maternal family business also hit rough patches. My grandfather was famously generous, lending silver to common folk without demanding receipts or repayment. So she secretly pocketed the silver, half sent to the Luo household, half spent on herself. When I learned this in my past life, my rage boiled over. I switched her medicine, driving her mad in no time. In the dead of winter, she stumbled and fell into a pond. Rescued, she caught a severe chill and passed away soon after. In my previous life, I never wished her such a swift death. TSK. Perhaps I'll never learn to emulate my grandfather's magnanimity. With the old wise prince vouching for it, this matter is as good as settled. The capital's common folk will have yet another topic for their after-dinner gossip. The old wise prince returned my IOU and personally helped me to my feet. My dear little one. It's been so many years since we last met. Hearing those words, my dear little one, tears welled up in my eyes. Your Highness is so far away. Even if I longed to see you, I couldn't. Ah. Duty called. Now that I am old, I shall spend my twilight years here in the capital. Yet I have no children of my own, and the mansion feels so lonely. The old wise prince gazed at me with tender affection. In my past life, when he returned, I had already married into the general's household. We met briefly to catch up, but not long after, he passed away from illness. Truthfully, only I knew the truth, he hadn't been ill. With no loved ones left in the capital, consumed by grief for his departed wife and the children who had perished on the battlefield, he had taken his own life. Following the blueprints my grandfather drew long ago, I built the study residence. If your Highness does not disdain it, this humble daughter wishes to care for you in your twilight years and see you off when the time comes. The old wise prince seemed to have been waiting for these words. His eyes reddened as he nodded repeatedly. Good. Good. Very good indeed. By then, a crowd had gathered outside Chunshi Hall. Watching me lead the old wise prince home, their expressions varied. Some looked on with envy, others sighed. They murmured, a family that accumulates virtue will surely reap blessings. The next day, news of the divorce spread through the general's residence. Such a scandal, such a loss of face. Though the silver they'd embezzled had benefited the entire household, someone had to take the fall. Lady Luo, old and faded, had been harsh toward General Zhang's concubines, and he hadn't taken any new ones for years. Thus, Lady Luo was divorced, bearing all blame. The general's household sent the owed silver with interest, tore up the IOU, and washed their hands of the matter. It was said that upon hearing this, Jiangli, unable to bear his mother's loneliness in her twilight years, severed ties with the general's household altogether. He took his mother and 3 younger sisters to establish their own household. Simultaneously, he sent 2 solid gold piece locks and a letter. Junyu, knowing you wish not to see me, I shall not come to trouble your eyes. But you must accept these gifts for the children. I also bring apologies from Mother to you and Minister Lin. Her greed and folly were too great, while the general's household proved ungrateful and unprincipled. This calamity was deserved. Yet as children, we cannot forsake filial duty. I hope you understand. Li examined the 2 solid gold safety locks closely. Just as in my past life, they were crafted by his own hands. Only the names engraved upon them differed from before. Now inscribed were Cloudlight and Windsoft. He had indeed inquired thoroughly. After some thought, I ultimately accepted both golden locks. Truthfully, even without the old wise prince, I had ways to make the Luo family acknowledge the debt. It would have taken some effort, perhaps even resorting to unscrupulous means. But with the old wise prince stepping in, his status and standing commanding respect, it wouldn't just be true. Even if it were false, it would become true. That's how crucial power is. When my grandfather was alive, wasn't I a prized possession wherever I went? Now, though neglected, I'm still shielded by his virtue. In my past life, whenever crisis struck, benefactors always aided me in secret. In this life, Xiaoyu treats me so well partly because I saved him, but his reverence for my grandfather is another reason. My grandfather, though long gone, still watches over his granddaughter. The miscellaneous manuscripts he left behind, after being sorted through by me, the old wise prince, and Xiaoyu, have been recopied. Yet the progress of movable type printing still lags. But I never gave up. Frequently mingling in the streets, I finally found new inspiration among the clay sculptors and bricklayers. I had them collaborate with woodcarvers to fire a batch of clay movable type. These were then framed in wood and coated with an inexpensive ink, a mixture of black oil seeping from the grasslands and graphite. Over this, thick paper was laid, made from a pulp of river-soaked bamboo, pine needles, and weeds. The characters printed this time were clear, the layout beautiful, and most importantly, the cost was low. Moreover, the sturdy paper was more durable and, when bound into books, possessed a satisfying texture. You see, while Xian paper is excellent, its raw materials are rather expensive. Add to that the cost of ink and the original woodblock printing process. Books thus became a luxury item beyond the means of ordinary households. After the first set of books was printed, I excitedly embraced Xiaoyu, kissing and laughing, ha 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 ha. Did you see that? I succeeded! I did! His face flushed, his eyes sparkling as he looked at me. Old Prince Yen, teasing my little ones Yundan and Feng Qing nearby, pretended not to notice us. Those 2 little rascals could already walk, dragging old Prince Yen around the gardens all day. They'd pull the silliest faces, keeping him smiling constantly. After supper that evening, the old prince held the book I'd printed and some movable type accessories, his expression grave as he looked at me. Nan Nan, accompany this prince to the palace. Had this invention never been created, it would be one thing. But now that it exists, even I may not be able to keep it. It must be presented. I understood his meaning. Agreed. Over the years, woodblock printing and the precious Xian paper and ink had developed robust commercial chains. Moreover, most of these businesses were controlled by wealthy aristocratic families. Wasn't what I had created essentially slapping them in the face and snatching their livelihood? Late at night, we entered the palace. The old wise prince and I knelt before His Majesty, who had just passed 40. His Majesty set aside the memorials and carefully examined the items we brought. Recognizing they were crafted from my grandfather's handwritten notes, he regarded them with particular esteem. You claim this book's production cost is remarkably low. How low? I straightened my back, pride evident in my expression, Your Majesty, including all labor costs for movable type printing, this book cost 1 tael of silver. However, the movable type itself can be disassembled, rearranged, and reused repeatedly. Thus, the more books printed, the lower the cost per copy. His Majesty nodded, then inquired further, but if we exclude the carving and firing of the movable type, considering only paper, binding, and ink, what would the cost be? I couldn't help but smile, replying with measured confidence, Your Majesty, merely 10 cash coins. 10 cash? His Majesty gaped in astonishment, his hands trembling slightly as he held the book, a hand-copied book on the market. Even an introductory text like the 3-character classic, costs half a liang of silver, or 500 cash. The production cost alone is at least 300 cash. Yet yours requires a mere 10 cash. His Majesty's eyes brimmed with emotion as he looked at me, as if seeing my late grandfather through my face. The Chancellor has left us a true treasure. Attendant! Draft an imperial decree. Appoint Lin Junyu as 6th-rank Assistant Director of the Ministry of Works. The Ministry shall establish a printing bureau and a paper manufacturing bureau, and open Confucian academies nationwide, all under Lin Junyu's supervision. 6th-rank Assistant Director of the Ministry of Works. In that instant, tears welled in my eyes. I bowed deeply in gratitude. Thank you for Your Majesty's profound grace. Though our dynasty has a system of female officials, those who truly qualify are exceedingly rare. My ability to hold office stems from my grandfather's legacy. Yet the old wise prince saw it differently. Your grandfather left behind notes, but he himself never succeeded in creating the items. You achieved the breakthrough, that is your true ability. How you will now ensure everyone in the realm can afford books, that will prove your true competence. That day, clutching my official robes, I embarked upon a path utterly different from my past life. Thank you, wise prince, for your guidance. My appointment to the court became a marvelous topic of discussion among the common folk. The Ministry of Works and the Ministry of War have always been deeply interconnected departments. Though their locations are quite distant, personnel frequently moved between them. News arrived from the northern frontier of D tribes raiding border towns. Jiang Li, already stationed at the Ministry of War, volunteered to lead the northern expedition. Thus, when I took my post at the Ministry of Works, I never encountered him. Instead, I often crossed paths with the ink-dark-skinned General Jiang, who came to verify the types and progress of weapon forging. Fortunately, my responsibilities had no overlap with his, so I avoided awkward small talk and nearly endured the situation. But one day, as he passed by me, he snorted coldly, a hen crowing at dawn. I lazily retorted, a corpse occupying a post. Watching his face darken further, I elegantly rolled my eyes and returned to my department. In the days that followed, I drove my workers to rush produce movable type printing components while expanding the paper-making workforce. Upon seeing my movable type printing, the Minister of Works was deeply moved. Perhaps recalling my grandfather, tears welled in his aged eyes. This old servant once mocked the Chancellor for his fanciful dreams. Who would have thought they'd be realized through your hands? A golden age for scholars across the land is dawning. I shook my head, watching the laborers at work, and sighed. My grandfather once said this world harbors prejudice against educating women. They should not be confined by conventions, trapped within the inner quarters their entire lives. When we established the National Classics Academy, I think we could reserve a small side room for the women. The Minister of Works gave me a deep look and shook his head gently. The Chancellor did indeed say those words, but he never implemented them in his lifetime. Can you guess why? I pursed my lips and sighed, fear of shaking the foundations of the state and causing chaos. The Minister of Works nodded, yet the education of men in political scholarship has persisted for 1,000 years, while most women excel in poetry. We cannot deny that many women possess great intelligence, but their nature leans toward deep emotional bonds. Such devotion easily leads to partiality and disorder. Moreover, bearing children demands immense physical and emotional energy from women. Some fertile women give birth to over a dozen children in their lifetime. Even the most talented among them struggle to sustain their pursuits amidst such intermittent childbearing. Thus, cultivating a man costs far less than cultivating a woman. Yet is this not society's biased definition of women? I disagree. If women are not taught to place their husbands above all else, how could they become sentimental? If couples practiced monogamy, bearing only one child each, and both parents raised their offspring together, how could women be burdened by childbirth and childrearing? The root of the problem lies in foundational education. Resolving this issue will likely not happen overnight. But every endeavor must begin somewhere. I still wish to try. The Minister of Works gazed at me silently for a long while, then sighed deeply. He said nothing more, merely bowed his head to organize his documents. Over the next 5 years, movable type printing, coupled with inexpensive paper and ink, was taken up by imperial merchants who swiftly opened up the market. The interests of the great aristocratic families suffered severe damage. I consequently faced numerous retaliatory assassination attempts. Fortunately, His Majesty had made prior arrangements, deploying covert guards among my entourage to eliminate those threats. Moreover, a mysterious figure of extraordinary martial prowess seemed to operate within my circle. Even the most skilled assassins couldn't withstand more than a few exchanges against him. I learned of this one night when I rose to find him dispatching over a dozen assassins in mere moments, leaving the rear garden drenched in blood. By the time I snapped out of my shock, the figure had vanished. Instead, Xiaoyu emerged limping from the outhouse, claiming he'd encountered a black-clad figure earlier, startled himself, and stumbled in the outhouse. I gave a wry smile, resignedly supporting him back to his quarters to rest. My inner voice raged, "What a useless scholar." Over the next 5 years, I printed every volume from my grandfather's library and donated them all to the Imperial Academy of Classical Studies. The initiative was widely praised. However, as the academy spread to major cities nationwide, its practice of segregating male and female students sparked controversy. As a result, my desk piled high with petitions from scholars and officials condemning the policy. Fortunately, His Majesty is a wise ruler. He suppressed these petitions and issued a proclamation to the realm. Henceforth, every 5 years, a special examination for women would be held. The requirement was clear: they must achieve excellence equal to that of men to qualify. There would be no favoritism granted for being female. Furthermore, they must sign an agreement: in this lifetime, they could only bear 2 children. Those who exceeded this limit would be dismissed from their posts. Though still demanding for women, this offered a glimmer of hope to women across the land. Some women even took sterilization pills, dedicating themselves wholly to their studies, determined to compete with men. Over the past 5 years, Jiangli had earned remarkable military honors, becoming a favored figure in the emperor's court and was granted the title of General of the Northern Frontier. 2 years ago, I was promoted to Assistant Minister of Works, serving alongside him in the court. This meant we saw each other daily. Thus, the atmosphere before and after court sessions inevitably grew somewhat awkward. Fortunately, he no longer troubled me. Soon after, Xiaoyu entered the imperial examinations and won first place, becoming the new top scholar. I asked with a smile, "Didn't you say reaching the top meant nothing to you since you'd already been there?" He wrapped his arm around my waist and snorted coldly, "My dear, you attend court daily, debating with old acquaintances in the halls of government. If your husband doesn't climb higher, what if one day you and our children are lost? Wouldn't that mean I've worked for someone else's benefit?" His teasing tone made me chuckle. I took his hand and placed it on my belly. "But now you're the top scholar. Soon you'll be appointed to office. Who will care for me during my pregnancy and confinement then?" His eyes widened in shock. His gaze grew hopeful as his hand trembled slightly on my abdomen. You're... I nodded, gazing at him tenderly. "I've already requested a year's leave from His Majesty. It's perfect timing to lie low. Your official post will compensate for my lost salary, ensuring our family doesn't go hungry." Suddenly, he clutched me tightly, burying his head in my shoulder, damp with tears. "Good. I'll join the Ministry of Works too, to hold your position." The following year, I gave birth to twins, a boy and a girl. This time was more perilous. Our daughter was breech. I endured labor pains all night and nearly didn't recover. Fortunately, the imperial physician arrived in time. He used acupuncture to steady my chi and guided the midwife to correct the baby's position. Finally, our little daughter was born. During my confinement, Xiaoyu silently sought out the imperial physician and drank a potion to render himself childless. When I learned of this, I felt both moved and heartbroken. I had heard that such medicine was extremely harmful to the body. That night, we lay close together, sorting through the events of our past and present lives. We marveled at life's impermanence, yet felt profound gratitude that heaven had granted us a second chance. Another year passed. News arrived from the frontier. Jiangli had met with disaster. Refusing the Miao girl's offer to heal him with the heart-binding curse, his severe wounds proved fatal. His body rotted away until death. Upon receiving the news, I remained deeply unsettled for a long time. Holding our 7-year-old son, Yindan Fengqing, I sat in silence all afternoon. Children are sensitive. Sensing my distress, they quietly kept me company without fuss. The following month, I received a letter. Junyu, that night, I hid outside your bedroom, listening to you and that man pour out your hearts to each other. So you both have past lives and present ones. In your past life, I wronged you. You've been unfair to me. I'm not the man from your past life. How could you know I'd betray you too? Look, I won't betray you. Li Xiaoyu snorted derisively upon reading it. That's the you of this life, the dazzling sun he could never possess. Had these events not unfolded, he'd still have chosen the bond of hearts. I shook my head and sighed. He should have chosen the heart-binding spell. After all, this world holds more than just love. After Jiangli died in battle, Lady Luo was devastated. She descended into madness, stumbled into the water, and was found dead the next day. When the general's mansion fell, everyone turned against it. General Jiang was accused of embezzling military funds, stripped of his rank, and his family's assets confiscated. The 2 remaining young masters supposedly journeyed south to seek their fortunes, their whereabouts now unknown. The 3 married daughters, disgraced by their mother's family's downfall, were divorced by their husbands and cast out. These 3 ladies, however, possessed some spirit. They took their children to live in Jiang Li's old residence, secluding themselves to study and research military strategy, preparing to take the upcoming imperial examinations for women. After Jiang Li's death, Xiaoyu found himself troubled. Jiang Li had died too young. With the great Qian kingdom's borders unstable, what was to be done? Well then, I shall take the military examination myself. I raised an eyebrow, looking at him with surprise. You know martial arts? I had always thought him a scholarly weakling, otherwise, how could he have been so thoroughly beaten when we first met? Years later, I learned he was actually the famed scholar judge of the martial world, known as the White-Faced Scholar. After rejecting the daughter of the Martial Alliance leader, he was hunted down. Martial artists showed no mercy, ambushes, poison, relentless attacks. Even iron couldn't withstand that. After a year of struggle, Xiaoyu fled in disarray, seeking refuge in the capital. He blended into the court, carving out a new path. Xiaoyu took Jiang Li's place on the northern frontier battlefield. With his memories from a past life, he managed to perform almost as well as Jiang Li had. Yet after every victory, he couldn't help but sigh, what a waste of Jiang Li. We spent more time apart than together, much like Jiang Li and I had in our previous lives. He often invited me to live with him on the northern frontier, but I was increasingly absorbed in the education of women and their prospects after learning. He would complain that I cared more about my duties than him. But I always replied, beyond love, this world holds so many things worthy of my passion. I cherish you, I cherish our children, and I cherish this vast world. If you bloom, the breeze will come. The end.